We were waiting for Mandela to land to see what he would say to these disgruntled South African former ANC soldiers and what he would say to them about their anger and their frustration. So we went to this podium, but he was nowhere to be found. And instead, we found him walking among the soldiers. And he went up to one of the soldiers, and here's a picture. I actually illustrated my book, so here's a picture of it. And he said, "Tell me, where do you live?" And the guy said, "Oh, in Alexandra Township." And Mandela said, "Yeah, I know that. What street? And the corner, what's the cross street? Oh, yes, I can picture that. And now tell me, why are you here?" And only after spending a whole hour wandering amongst the soldiers, hearing what they really thought, their real grievances, did he get on the podium and address them. And he said, "I've heard you. I can see that you're disgruntled and you're angry, and I'm going to go and try and deal with it. But now you need to have discipline. This is a new South Africa. Go back to your barracks." And all of the soldiers returned to their barracks quietly because they had been heard. And it was a really powerful example of the power of listening and what it could do in a situation where it could have gone either way. There were a lot of armed soldiers there, and it could have gone either way. So in the next hour or so is a chance to learn a specific skill and try a tool of deep listening. And I hope you'll be able to use this with your colleagues and your leadership to strengthen cross-border collaboration in your business development. And I'm sure some of you will be mentoring young lawyers and sometimes managing client expectations. So then just get a sense of where are you in your listening journey. If you could just give me fingers 1 to 5. 1, you're a beginning listener. 5, you think you're pretty bloody good because you really pride yourself on your listening. I'm seeing a 4 there. Let me see some more fingers. 3 or 4. Okay, so we've got a lot of expertise. At any moment, please feel free in the chat to share what you're thinking, or if you want to challenge me in any way. This is an interactive session, so feel free at any moment. And what I have found, that to deep listen, we need to be truly open to another person. And that can be very hard in a business context. It feels risky. It takes courage because we might end up changing our mind. And that can feel almost dangerous. And through research of my book, as Lindsay mentioned, my deep listening book that's almost published, and I've been spending the past few years, I did a big season on the BBC called Crossing Divides, all about engaging people across difference. And as a senior visiting research fellow at King's College, I've talked to psychologists, social psychologists, neuroscientists, lawyers, academics, and drawn on my own practice as an executive coach and workplace mediator. And I found what's so important is about your intention, your ability to temporarily put your own agenda aside to really want to understand someone else's story, to be curious about someone else's story. And the reason it works, when people feel truly listened to, they feel safer, less defensive, and therefore open. They see their own world clearer, solutions to their own problems, especially, for example, if you're a leader or mentor. And you understand them better. Your connection is transformed. So it's magical, it's transformative, it's simple, and yet it is really hard to do, especially when you're really passionate about an issue and you feel you have significant expertise. And what's so important is the person feels heard. So it's critical to give 150% of your attention, which is really hard to do when you've got a million things in your mind and a million deadlines to meet. And of course, the thing that often takes the most attention from us, it's not only off, it's not new notification, but it's even out of sight. So I'm going to chuck it on the floor there so I can't even see it, yeah? Because it's so distracting for all of us. I don't know if any of you have ever been in a Zoom meeting when you're like looking below, out of sight, and you're checking your WhatsApp or your emails or your social media. Yeah, hands up who's done that. Yeah, we all do it, but the other person knows. Yeah, they know that they're not really getting our attention. My daughter did it this morning when I was talking to her, and it was kind of conversation was lengthy, and I kind of felt I had stuff to do. Mum, you're not listening. She felt that frustration. So this is really important to me, and I'm not being heard. I get it thrown in my face a lot like that. So is it okay if we just do a minute or two of mindful centering? Yeah. So if you feel comfortable, I'd like to invite you to close your eyes or cast them down. And if your legs are crossed, you might choose to uncross them and start to become aware of your breath, of the air entering your lungs and the air leaving your lungs. You might notice the seat beneath you and the earth beneath your feet. There may be sounds in your room or in the world beyond, and you can return your attention back to your breath. Each in-breath is a new beginning. It's got its unique texture, taste, and temperature. And each out-breath is for letting go. You might notice that your mind wanders. That's what our mind does. And notice too if you're judging yourself, and let that go too. And bring your attention back to your breath. Now I'd like you to think of someone you know who is a really good listener. There's not so many of them around, so if you can't think of anybody, just imagine a really good listener. What does it feel like to be listened to by them? And what is it that you're doing, and they're doing, that makes you feel like you're truly being heard? And when you feel ready, I'd like to invite you to open your eyes. And I'm wondering if any of you was able to think about a really good listener. Lindsay, tell me who you were thinking of. What's their name?
Becky, my best friend.
Okay.
She is an excellent listener. And in fact, she sent me an email as a Christmas gift about our friendship. And it really made me feel seen and heard.
So what is it? So you said Becky.
Becky, yep.
What is it that Becky's doing that makes you feel she's such a great listener?
She notices not only the things that I say, but the things that I don't say. She recognizes how I show up in the world. And so it's more than just the actual words I think that she's listening to, but all the social cues and that emotional the EQ that she has.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. And we'll talk about when you reflect back. And it sounds like Becky is a really superb listener because she's not just focusing on the words, she's focusing on the notes between the words and the emotions. And so when she's doing that, you feel she really gets you, like she responds in an email, and you feel, and it's so wonderful because all of us in our lives, we're looking for an opportunity to be truly heard, and most of us are not. Anybody else apart from Becky that they can think of who is a really good listener?
Yeah. I also thought about one or two friends of mine that are good listeners, and one of them is we are not together every day, of course, smartly together, but he's curiously also a journalist, and he takes I think he does what you were saying, like he clears his agenda while he looks outside to understand what's going on, and then he gets back to the reality with the picture done. But and looking at some curious details that are only possible because he's not thinking about what he's going to do with that.
Yeah. So it feels, and what's his name, your friend?
Alexander.
It feels like Alexander is, really present. He is able, because he is so present, to really capture all sorts of things which otherwise would just not get noticed. Is that right, Diego?
Yes, probably.
But not quite. What would I miss?
I think it's not about the presence. It's about the way he looks at things, or he stops to to listen and to understand what's going around what he's listening, and then he gets back to the conclusions to understand what's going on.
So he's looking at the context, not just
Probably, yeah.
Is that right? I haven't quite got it.
Listen, I just thought of this while you were thinking about someone. I never analyzed this in that way, of course.
Yeah. No, sorry, I don't mean to press you. I'm just interested because you obviously celebrate it. So we've got Alexandra and Becky to kind of inspire us about being a really, really good listener, and allow us really. And you know, obviously at work you've got a lot of time deadlines, and I know I was training some Hollywood execs, and they say we don't have time to do deep listening. We've got to answer sharp with witty things to say. You know, perhaps maybe lawyers are not Hollywood execs, but there's a lot of pressure on their time and they're billable per second. So, but you know, even in small, not microseconds, but minutes of time, we can still be fully present and be curious and put aside our agenda, and that can make all the difference in what someone chooses to share with us, whether they're a colleague or a client or somebody who we're struggling against, who we're working with and fighting against, so to speak. And it is that understanding which can give you so much more information and can make you feel more connected. So I'm going to talk just a second about go on.
Let me tell you something.
Yeah.
We were saying this. We were a bit guided, I think, by your idea of when you said think about someone you know that is a very good listener. We were thinking about it personally. I know a lot of good listeners professionally, especially because I would say a huge part of what a lawyer does, or I think that facilitates a lot of our work, is to be able to listen to our clients and to our partners. And professionally, I know a lot of people who are very good listeners. And that's also why when you ask where are we in the scale of being good listeners, a good lawyer must be a good listener.
Yeah, well, that's I have to say, I used to think as a journalist, I was a brilliant listener. I had fantastic questions. I could elicit great information when I was talking to, whether I was talking to former soldiers or presidents or whoever. And you might well find there's a lot of overlap between deep listening and the work that you do, but you also might find that it illuminates a different type of listening. So I'm interested to have your perspective after we've gone through. So I'm now going to share the 8 steps of deep listening with you. So the first step is about creating space. And I'm sure you're aware that when you are, let's say, giving and hearing about why one of your team has issues with timekeeping, you don't do it in an open plan office. You know, somebody has got to feel safe in order to share things that are important. But there's also, you know, the sound in a cafe, it's noisy, our echoes just reverberate, especially people a little older or struggling with their hearing. And lights, big overhead, downwards, blue white lights make us feel tense, softer up lights, you know, with a longer spectrum, make us feel more relaxed. And nature is even better if we have the time to go out for a walk. Walking's great, side by side, less confrontational than face to face, 60-degree angle ideal when you're talking to people. I've done a lot of research on this. And also, how can we make somebody feel really cherished? I spent time with Japanese tea ceremony practitioners, and they actually rotate their mug to get the perfect picture, to be able to, you know, the person should feel fantastic. And there's 72 seasons, and they get a treat for that specific season. So somebody, when they do a tea ceremony, can feel really cherished. You know, what can we do for those really important conversations we know we need to really mend a relationship, or there's somebody who's very different to us? The second step is listening to yourself first, because I know that if I'm about to have a conversation and I find that person really troublesome, really triggering, often it will be not because of them, it's because of my stuff that I'm projecting onto them. I was talking to a friend who is chair of an English regional energy company, and he said to me, can I just ask your advice? You know, I'm really struggling with somebody. I'm chair of this company and he's the accountant and he is one of my trustees, and yet I feel intimidated by him. It's just not working. I can't really tap into his expertise. I feel he's patronizing. And as he was talking this through, he suddenly went silent. He went like this. And then he had this illuminating moment, and he realized that this guy, his accountant, was reminding him of his bullying older brother who had his expertise, would do experiments in the kitchen and never share with him. And once he realized that it was that which was causing the issue, he was not able to be best buddies with the guy, but to start a relationship of collaboration, and it made a huge difference to them. So being aware of your agenda, taking that time, again, not every conversation, those really difficult, troublesome ones, to say, what's really going on here? What's my agenda? And perhaps is this relationship itself more important than what I think I need to get out of them? So, I mean, listening to yourself first, understand your shadows, it's a journey of a lifetime. But sometimes even a superficial looking can make a huge difference with that really important and difficult conversation. We were talking about curiosity earlier and the importance of curiosity, because our fourth step is about what we project to the speaker. And interestingly, the research evidence is that being curious, wanting to know, is even more important than knowing in enabling someone to feel heard. And that's crazy, it's counterintuitive. But if somebody really desires to know, understands that they don't yet understand, it makes all the difference for a speaker. And then that curiosity can reveal things that make us more empathetic. We're able to connect with them at a human level. We can become respectful, even if we don't agree with them. And that's critical. Listening does not imply agreement. And a lot of people think that it does. And once, especially young people, we did a research with 2,000 people across the US and across the UK. But once they're relieved of that thought, listening across difference becomes much more possible. And then holding the gaze, hard on a Zoom call. I want to look at your body language and I can't look at you in the eye, where I've got to look at the camera. But the gaze is so important, unless you're talking to a First Nation elder. So much research, babies from being born respond differently if people are looking them in the eye. And it's that gaze window. Often if the other person's really deeply thinking, they'll go on a wander, but because you're waiting for them, when they return, it will be so much richer. And of course the gaze is not a Foucault gaze of like a prison officer making his prisoners feel subjugated. It's a warm, empathetic, unconditional, positive regard type of gaze, which makes all the difference. And awareness of your own body language. And in terms of reading other people's body language, you know, tone of voice, the most important by far, research evidence as compared to facial expressions. Gestures, not very good unless you say the river was that high and you point up. So holding the silence. There was a paper that came out in 2021 called Silence is Golden, and found that in negotiations, when both parties were instructed to leave 20 seconds of silence, no one did leave 20 seconds. They all overestimated, but they came out with many more win-win outcomes, creative ideas where both parties benefited, and zero sum, I win, you lose. And then it's about reflecting back. And Lindsay, you talked earlier about your friend Becky in her email really understanding you, because we need to show the person we understand. Sometimes it might just be silence. Sometimes it will be the most critical word they've said. And sometimes it's about getting to the very core, the essence of what the person has said, and reflecting it back with humility to check in with them. And in my book, I talk a lot about some different clues that we can use in terms of ascertaining what's really important. And it might not be the thing that's said with most strength. It might be when they trade off into silence. They're a little unsure, but it's a new thought. And that's what's really exciting. We don't, you know, we speak so often at the surface of ourselves, especially in America and in Nigeria, 2 places you do spots, people have ready-made brilliant sound bites. Even elsewhere, we often talk our usual spiel. And when we want to have real conversations, we want to know what somebody really thinks, what really matters to them, because then we're able to enter into a whole different type of relationship. And therefore, it is so important to be able to reflect back, check in the very essence. And sometimes we take a guess, and even if we get it wrong, it doesn't matter, because they say, no, it's not quite like that. Tiago, early on, when I was talking about your friend, I said, oh, he does this. You said, yeah, and I knew I hadn't got it quite right. And that's okay, because when I don't get it quite right, you can correct me, and you understand more, and I understand more in that process. And then the 8th step is about going deeper to really understand what is truly important for the person, what's their motivations, and what are their values, what is their deeper narrative that's really driving them. And we might choose to share or not share, depending on our relationship, but it can really help all sorts of things become possible. Any questions or thoughts about these 8 steps? No? Okay, so I want to now give you a demonstration of deep listening, so you can have a chance to see how many of these 8 steps I'm able to do. So I'm going to ask somebody to tell me what food reminds them of home, and I will reflect back, and we'll see where we go. So is anybody willing to tell me about what food reminds them of home?
For me, it's macaroni and cheese.
Okay, so I'm hearing, Lindsay, you say macaroni and cheese. You sound quite definite and quite sure of it.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, that reminds me of being a kid and my mom making homemade macaroni and cheese, and it was one of my favorite meals. So it's
And I get a sense that it's something quite certain about your identity, being at home, your mum making it homemade for you, and that sense of being nourished and nurtured by her. Is that right?
Yes, yes. Yeah, it felt very caring. It was important to her to cook for us when we were kids, and that was one of the best things that she made.
And so not only did you feel nurtured, but you have a sense that it was important for her to communicate her feelings towards you through food and homemade food.
Mm-hmm.
It was part of her love language, or part of the way, and I think that gives you a kind of confidence. That
Yeah.
sense is that right?
Yes, yes, I would agree with that.
And tell me more.
Yeah, I mean, my relationship with my parents is now fraught, but when I was a kid, I think it was macaroni and cheese being one of my favorite meals. My sister's favorite meals definitely made us feel heard, because my mom would sometimes make things we didn't like, but that was a meal that took her a lot of time. It's something I repeat now when I need comfort food because it reminds me of being well cared for.
And so your mum made lots of different dishes, some you liked, some you didn't like, but it was that one where you knew she was responding to something that mattered to you and your sister. So that sense of being cared for, somebody putting in all that effort rather than doing anything else, spending time with you, creating, and even now it gives you that sense of comfort, even though your relationship with your mum isn't as good as it's great you said with your parents, but it still connects you with that side of her who cared for you, and that matters.
Yes, yes, I would agree with that.
So I'll start this exercise here. I think I was finding it quite hard because I had a sense that you didn't feel entirely comfortable sharing this stuff, and I perhaps should have named that. I don't know, because that was the noise in the room that I felt was there. What was it like for you, Lindsay?
Yeah, I think that's right, because my relationship with my parents is fraught. It's a mixed thing for me, because it does remind me of when things were better, but it also reminds me that things are not good now. And so it's that mix of it's a good memory, but it's also, and it reminds me of home, but it's also difficult because it reminds me that things are not as good as they could be.
And I don't know if you noticed, what's interesting, is that often we're reluctant to name the noise in the room. We talk about what looks like what's going on, but we are, because I got a signal from you that you didn't want to go there, we don't address that, and actually it's the most important thing that needs saying.
Yes, yes, and that's actually something I do a lot with my friends, well, with everybody, I think. Yeah, where something else is going on, and you think either I'm not in the space to deal with this right now, or I don't know that they want to deal with this right now, so let's just not address it.
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes hesitantly, if people feel comfortable, I don't know, what do you guys, what does anybody else think about that?
About the comfort in sharing your feelings about what you're saying?
Yeah, I guess the question is about.
I was listening to you and I was taking notes about what you said before.
Yeah, tell me, how many questions did I ask roughly?
I didn't count them, but say 12.
Well, yeah, okay, 12 or I don't know. Actually, I asked one question. Tell me the food reminds you of home. When Lindsay said macaroni cheese, I could have said, oh, did she homemade the pasta? I was interested. Maybe she homemade the pasta. Why did it take that long? What's the recipe? Where did you grow up? Is it your family Italian? There's so many questions I as a journalist had, but had I gone down that route, we would have never got to what was really going on for Lindsay there, yeah? And when we deeply listen, and I know how brilliant you lawyers are at their questions, for a moment you put them aside and you see what is really important for the speaker, what's going on for them. So if you're talking, for example, to a colleague or a client, what matters to them right now? And, they might obviously not want to share personal stuff, but giving them the opportunity to take the steering wheel and to go down where they think is important can reveal a lot more about what's important to them than your questions about wherever I want to go down. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Any other reflections about how you thought I did with my deep listening?
It was interesting when you following your topics that I just kept in mind. I haven't noted the topics, but when you stopped to get back and with the noise in the room, that's when we feel that Lindsay got comfortable with saying, okay, I want to say, I'm going to release this. And it's interesting because it's not a thing that you do by allowing people to get comfortable. You did it the other way around. So this isn't comfortable for you. Do you want to step into it, or do you want to leave it?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is that it can be very, very impactful is being a bit vulnerable yourself. Again, new research came out that even with a robot, everybody knew it's a robot. Entering a group of conversation, people know it's a robot. The robot is vulnerable and say, well, I'm not very good at this. People talk for longer, shared more, especially people who don't say anything. And therefore, I'm struggling a bit here. Just being open can really unlock all sorts of things. There's also an ethical issue here because when we deeply listen, people can often reveal perhaps more than they intended to share. And in a professional context, we might need to say, well, wait a minute, are you sure you want to go any further? Or you just told me something I'm not sure you intended to, so obviously we'll keep that confidential. I've got a whole chapter in the book about the ethical issues, both to your speaker, but also to yourself, ethical obligations about protecting your own self, because some people can share more than you're willing to bear, and that can be really tough. And I was trying to use a few seconds of silence, not always 10, but try if you can, because now you're going to have a go yourself at having this deep listening conversation. Yeah. So you're going to go in a breakout room, Tiago, with maybe Jay, or maybe actually Lindsay, and ask why don't you, Lindsay, in fact, Tiago, why don't you have a go at listening and ask Jay, Jay, you go in a breakout room with Tiago, and ask Jay what food reminds her of home, and see if you can have a go with this deep listening. So it means, let me just give you a bit of instructions here, and I'll just share that. So you're asking what food reminds you of home, and you want to use your presence, your body language open, and your gaze hard on a Zoom call, and try 10 seconds of silence. So no brilliant questions, Tiago, yeah? You're just reflecting back, and if she really comes up and doesn't say anything, you can say after 10 seconds, tell me more. Don't say what else, because then I'll just give you other details, say tell me more. And see if you can include the noise in the room, and see what happens. And anything Jay says is confidential to your breakout room, and you can talk about the listening afterwards. So we'll give you 5 minutes to have a listen, and Tiago, you'll listen to Jay. Is that okay?
Okay.
So Jay, could you go into a breakout room with Tiago?
Yes,
and then maybe Lindsay, you could be listening to me.
Yes, I will do that. Great. So Emily, tell me, what food reminds you of home?
Well, similarly to you, my mum would make for me stuffed cabbage leaves, I think it was. And it was that sense because she was working hard, and that sense that I like them. I think she made it on my birthday. It had rice and tomato, maybe some mincemeat inside, and it might even come from her Russian parents. But it felt, homely, and that feeling of being loved and looked after. And I don't have it very often. Now I don't make it. But I liked it, and I liked it, especially because I was one of 3 sisters, so that sense it was for me, and like that. And it was also a sense of sitting with silence of it being at something else's expense. Because my mum was working, so particularly my dad died when I was a kid. There's a lot to do. She was working, bringing the 3 of us up, and therefore the sense that she was putting aside time, that she was focused and dedicated, that felt really good.
Tell me more.
You want to try and sum up first. You want to sum up what I've said, the emotions, the very core of what I've said, because that will help me lead me into more.
Keep going. Okay. Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is that this is a food that was made special just for you and not your sisters, and that it meant even more to you because you lost your dad so young, and your mom was working hard, obviously, to take care of you and your sisters. So this was something that she would have had to really focus on and take time to create for you as something special.
Yeah, I mean, my sister ate it, but it was what I particularly liked, and that felt really nice. Yeah, so maybe it is interesting because my mum's Israeli, but she was living in London, and her parents were originally Russian, and I don't know whether there's that sense of it being a Russian. I can imagine it was a food that her mother made her. I must ask her. She's very old now, but I don't know if she'll know that, because there were certain foods my grandmother made who lived in Israel, and I don't know whether it was that, and whether she liked that too, and it reminded her of home perhaps. I don't know. It's not a normal English thing to cook, It's not really English food because we weren't English at all, but...
So it sounds like for you, the cultural connection is very important too, being that your grandparents were Russian and Israeli, and that you're wondering if there might be a cultural piece to the food that you ate as well as that family piece.
Yeah, because I was very conscious in Israel that my grandmother, she made gefilte fish, kind of Jewish, food, which I couldn't stand. When we went to see her in the summers, we used to go many summers, 6 weeks in my mum's old flat in Tel Aviv. She got gefilte fish sometimes, and she would make bunions. My grandmother never worked, unlike my mum, and cooking for her was a big deal. And she'd be forced, she didn't speak English, and she thought she was like when I was small, she like a tick, which was her understanding of take. She didn't speak English. She's forcing food down. I was a very skinny little kid, so yeah, I think she, it was her table, and what my mum grew up in, as well as fresh Israeli fruit and veg, because they, had lovely fruit and veg there, much more so than in England. Like when I got in the 70s, we didn't really do food. It was just like a desert of food. Whereas my mum was always, well, she wasn't actually a very good cook at all. And maybe that's part of it. She really didn't know how to cook, because for her mum, cooking was her space, and therefore she didn't really welcome my mother into that space. So my mum didn't have a clue to cook when she came, and then eventually she got married. She had to go to a court in Black Horse, and she just really didn't know anything. So I don't know where she learned to make these stuff. She wasn't. We did have loads of salads and stuff, but she cooking wasn't. It wasn't like my mother-in-law. It's like some people are really good cooks and things, and my mother was just not one of them. But she's very creative in lots of other ways. So.
Do you think it made it more special for you, knowing that she wasn't a good cook and this wasn't something that was natural to her because of the way she was brought up, that for her cooking the special dish that she knew you loved meant even more?
Yeah, that's a question. You might frame it as a reflection. So I'm sensing from what you've said that because she really wasn't a good cook and she didn't know much, that somehow, that was a really beautiful intuition. But rather than it's like being yours, you're making it with hesitancy, as offering it as a possibility about whether I feel it in that way. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, I was wondering how to frame that.
Yeah.
For 5 minutes of them.
Yeah, well, that's not a bad thing. I want to know what it was like. What was listening like, Tiago? What was being listened to like, Jay? What did you find hard? What was weird?
It's do I start or
Go on.
From my perspective, from putting just one question and then try to squeeze it's not squeeze, but think about what Jay was saying without, inevitably I had to do 2 or 3 questions that drove the conversation a bit. But because it's very hard to do just one question and then wait until and doesn't it's I don't know. Well, I know. It's hard not to make it awkward while just being in silence, waiting for the other person to get back to the conversation to say, okay, tell me more. And without dragging the conversation a bit. But being aware of the guy there and how you did it with Lindsay, I think there is a huge difference between just letting the other person go or trying to conduct it, even for a bit. It's very different.
Yeah.
And the results are not the same.
And the results are?
The results are not the same.
They're not the same. So tell me about Honey
I think this little minutes with Jay didn't make it possible to repeat the same or the same level of deepness in understanding the other people as he did with Lindsay. I think I was not able to make Jay that comfortable to speak more, to tell me more. On the other hand, what Jay told me was a very happy memory that is kept. So there wasn't much to say, okay, what's going on here? Because it's something that endures in time until now. And so there was no uncomfort there. And there was, and as I think I was not able to make Jay that comfortable to allow her to speak for 5 minutes in a row and just for me to listen. And I have to put 2 or 3 questions like time, what's around and so on. I think by driving the conversation or by me feeling a bit awkward just to be in silence and let her speak, by driving the conversation, the other person, in this case Jay, feels more compelled to respond to the questions, and she's not so free to speak her mind openly.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I would say the ambition here is not to go down to uncomfortable zones. I mean, if there are, then people feel like and feel comfortable, and the idea is just to gain a deeper understanding. I mean, Lindsay was listening to me talk about what food reminds me of home, and she didn't. I mean, there wasn't anything really uncomfortable. I talked about my dad dying when I was a kid, but she acknowledged that. She didn't ask. She didn't say, "So tell me what it was like with dad." That was just something I mentioned, and if I had chosen to, I would have gone there. But I didn't. But then what I found, even though I was talking about happy memory and a nice food, I did end up telling her about all sorts of family cultural relations and all sorts of things that I hadn't intended to, because she was just listening warmly and openly, and it ended up me feeling more connected. I felt more connected to you, Lindsay, in the conversation, and I ended up, about my strange family and cultural roots, which were all over the place. I don't know, Jay, what did that feel like for you being listened to? And I would say with the silence is you've got to do something with all of these deep things. It's got to feel right for you. It isn't a formula, A, B, C, D, E you have to follow. It's about finding your own way. It's about stretching your discomfort to see where you can go and being that you're not, it doesn't feel awkward. But I would say that people, after doing the silence, that's the thing they say to me, without fail is awkward. But again, without fail, when I return to people and I do a lot of repeat sessions, they say that's made the most difference to their lives, because they have given a space for new thoughts to emerge that they otherwise would not even have guessed. Any thoughts from you, Jay?
Yeah, that was really good. I think Tiago, you were able to get a lot of information from me about the memory. I think it was just more shorter because it's like I was telling him about my family has like a pecan tree, and I was saying my favorite food was pecan pie because I had a memory of me. My siblings took a picture of me just eating one whole pie, and so. But yeah, I think it did really good. It just is like, well, tell me more. And so in that, it's like, well, I don't know. I still would eat a whole pie to this day. It's like when we make pecan pies, like we have one to the side for me to eat. So, but it was really good. I didn't feel like it was awkward to talk about that.
That's interesting as well. Sometimes, you as a listener think it's awkward, whereas the speaker, they just feel they're finally getting the space.
Yeah, it's true. The scene from the other perspective, it might be totally different.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And deeply listening when we think differently from somebody, when we're in disagreement, when we're having a challenging time, is so much harder. And you know, holding back, one thing that I find a lot of professional people, especially leaders, they feel that their job is to solve and to sort. So when people come with them with problems or challenges, they feel that they need to come up with a solution. That's why they're being talked at, or that's why this information is being shared. And of course, when we do that, we are really depriving the person of their agency and taking control of that agency ourselves. And even if our solution is a great one, it's ours and not theirs, and they're far less likely to implement it because they haven't joined the dots themselves. So an awareness when we are trying to solve and sort and letting that go and allowing the other person to come to their own conclusion can be really, really useful. And to stay curious and empathetic and respectful. And I'm about to have another go, where this time you're talking about a challenge, a relationship that you find challenging in some way. Don't have to give any names, it's confidential. It could be with a client, with a colleague, with a partner, and it even might be with a family member. And you're just going to talk and the other person will listen about that issue to you. And again, you don't have to name the person, you can give them a false name if you want. And your job here is to do the deep listening, to really, another thing that you can do if you're feeling like, oh, there's not more to say, you can do a meta summing up. You can sum up everything that they've said so far. So I'm saying that really, you've spoken a contradiction on one level, you find this client really good to work with and you're excited and stimulated. And on the other hand, you find yourself provoked often. Is that right? Because pointing out contradictions, or I'm getting the sense you're talking about a lot of different situations and all of them, you're repeating the same pattern of frustration. You know, make that meta-analysis. You're making sense, so you are suggesting sense. You are borrowing on borrowed finery. You're not quite sure if it fits, and you're saying, I'm thinking that this is going on, and they can help clarify in their mind what actually is the case. So I want you for a second to have a think about what somebody, you're going to tell me about a relationship you currently have with a colleague, client, family member, where communication's not going so well. You don't even really know why, but you're having a bit of a blockage, and it's important. It's not just the guy who delivers the mail. You know, this is an important relationship. It's not going so well. Might be in the past, might be in the present. It's an opportunity for somebody to listen to you and for you to unpack your own thoughts. Yeah? Do you want to have a go with that? You feel ready? So Jay, would you like to listen to me?
Sure.
So I'm going to talk not about a relationship but this business of me finding these art wound asks, because this is bothering me.
Yeah,
Because I need to do that at the moment, yeah?
for sure, you do.
I need to. It's only 2 weeks the London launch and 6 weeks the US launch. Is that right? Yeah. And I need to, maybe it's 6.5. I need to continue to do these asks. And there's something that's getting in the way, and I don't really know what it is. Like, I notice that I've been really fine till a few days ago, like a week ago, and now I'm struggling. Like, even Harvard Business Review, somebody introduced me to the editor, and it would be great if I had a piece in that. And I know it's tough because they have a lot of pieces on listening, and I just can't write it, and I had to send out invites for my London launch, and it's and I'm okay when people say no. I asked somebody in Chatham House, which is a big think tank, and I said, oh, and she said, no, we've got enough on this. And I don't have a problem with that. So it's curious, like, what am I, people, in fact, rather somebody said no, I think it's being ignored. It's like, I don't mind if somebody says no, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
It's almost being, I don't know what was going on, why I'm so worried about that,
Well, you said it started more so like a week ago. Was it something that
Yeah.
happened last week, maybe?
No, don't do the summing. You're summing up. That's a question. You're saying. So I'm hearing you say that this sort of changed about a week ago. Is that right? Yeah, it's a different, because I could say no, whereas when you ask me a question, I have to answer your question. You see the difference?
I do, yeah.
So yeah, it was about, and I don't know what changed. Because I've been really up for it. I've been doing this stupid game. I've been spending the past few months just reaching out to people and, getting some success. And I don't know what it is that changed things. I think it is that, and it was interesting, she says the ask wound. It's that level of vulnerability. And it's made me feel a bit less confident as a whole, which I need to be confident. And I'm really happy doing these workshops. I did a workshop yesterday. I've done podcasts almost every day, and I'm fine with all of that. It's this asking. It's this sense of being powerless, the feeling like, oh, I'm on the outside. I was at the BBC for decades, and now I'm not. I'm outside, and will you please, deign to give this some publicity? And that feels like, I think it's being, one of the things I wrote these 4 cards of things that make me feel insecure. And one of them is this sense of being excluded. And I think that's what I'm finding hard.
You think so?
Yeah. I think the feeling that I'm not, you know, I'm used to being an editor. I'm used to people asking me, oh, can you cover this? Can you do this? Can you do that? And we sit there and we go, yes, no, you know, and now I'm not. I'm on the outside.
Oh, that
And
makes a lot of sense. You're used to more so being on the other side of this and
yeah,
not being the person that has to do the asking. You're the one that's being
yeah,
asked, it sounds like.
exactly. And it's something, and maybe it's something that somebody said, you know, oh, we don't do this sort of thing, you know, the sort of rejection. But as I say, it's not the rejection that I mind. I mean, I appreciate that some people, but you know, you just get ignored. Most people are crap at saying no. I try and say no to people because I just think it's good for people to know, but a lot of people don't feel confident and they therefore don't reply. And it's that feels painful to me.
Yeah, because it's almost like getting no answer. If you just tell me no,
Yeah,
then I
yeah,
know what's
yeah,
happening. If you don't say anything, I
exactly.
have no idea.
Exactly. And I'm working with this rubbish UK publicist, but at least she's now taking direction from me. And my US publicist is pretty on it. I mean, she's getting me quite a lot. And but I'm finally, yeah, you know, so I think it's the feeling of being not really feeling it's this feeling on the outside. I think it is because I wrote these 4 cards. Look. I did pictures of these 4 things that upset me. Because I found it helpful. I made 4 cards, look. And one of them was the feeling about exclusion, you see,
Oh my. Well, I do think that that's the coolest thing. I know that these are things that upset you, but
Well, I just thought if I could if I've got these 4 things that upset me, which is exclusion, there's business about hierarchy, business about feeling negated, and the feeling about unfairness, they're like my cards. And so when I'm triggered, I'm like, oh, it's like having the cards there gives me a feeling of control. And just through talking about it, because you've been such a good listener, I've realized that there's definitely some exclusion there, probably, to do with my family history. My grandparents were killed in concentration camps and my father was a refugee and so a lot of things, you see. So I think that bothers me, and that's why I feel that they're in control, they're in these positions of power, because my other thing is about hierarchy and safety and security you get from hierarchy. So I think, you see, I'm getting a double whammy of cards because I'm getting the feeling of exclusion and the feeling like these people are all big and powerful in these institutions and I'm on the outside and I'm asking them for a favor and it doesn't feel, and even this business about kind of feeling negated as if my ideas and my voice, this is one of them, you see, is not being listened to. So I feel like I have a voice, I've written this book, and all these people are choosing to not allow my voice by not, I mean, this is not rational. Yeah, this is bonkers ideas. I'm just saying. So I think, you see, I've even got that one. And then I think that sense of unfairness, that I think that they should cover it. I sort of feel entitled, wrongly so, but I sense like I'm part of the people whose stories should be covered. So why the hell are they not covering my book? So I think that's what's going on. I've got all my 4 cards, you see.
yeah, you have the answers on your
Yeah. I recommend doing cards, by the way.
What do they, so how do the cards make you feel? It feels like being in control because you can look at them, huh?
Yeah, because exactly like even this story, these are the ones I've learned because I've had a lot of years of therapy and figuring out, I know these are my triggers. Like every single time something's bothering me, it will be some combination of these. Yeah. I mean, everyone has their own stuff. And my therapist didn't do that. I just did these myself. And then I wrote them and I painted them. Look, you see. And then I wrote them out and I made them colorful and I stuck them on real playing cards. And I like them having cards because they feel playful. They feel like not scary.
It takes something very scary and makes it like playful and non-serious and powerless.
Exactly. Like, these aren't so frightening. They're just my friendly cards, And it's so interesting because I think that this is exactly why this has bothered me so much. I feel completely different now. Look what you've been able to help me with, Jay. No,
I think you got a
seriously.
life hack with your cards. I have to try that.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to figure out, and it takes time. Like, what is it, which things really trigger you? What are things that you feel really irrationally strongly about, like really bugs you, and you can make your own set, and then you have to draw pictures for them, you see,
And make it colorful and fun.
and make it colorful. I painted them. I did it on nice watercolor paper. I do like painting, so
Fun. So
do
now I
you
know
work?
that too. You like painting.
Yeah, because that's what I did, that Mandela picture. I painted illustrations for
Oh,
my
you
book.
did. Wow.
So yeah. So but this is exactly why. I don't know why suddenly after a week, I don't know the answer to that. But I think that's exactly why. And I suddenly feel different because I went for a walk with my husband. I felt a bit better, but not 100% better. And
That's
now I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go for it. Now I understand,
no.
I'm not excluded. I'm outside, but I've written a book. They're all stuck there in their institutions, which is boring. And, I got fed up with that. So that's fine. And then negotiating my voice, they're not really. They're just choosing, and that's their right. You know what I mean? It's like they choose, and I still might get coverage in different places, and that's that. And it's not unfairness. I mean, I've already, as I told you at the beginning, through contacts and things, got all sorts of coverage. I don't think the very fact I've got a book deal, it's hardly unfair that I'm being published by HarperCollins in the big scheme of things. So that's not very unfair. And, safety and security, I don't need to have a big fat job. I don't need coverage. I don't want to be famous, So.
Yeah.
So yeah, Jay did some amazing listening to me. I just want to say that I've suddenly understood why I was feeling so frustrated about my book publicity. So
That's amazing.
yeah, she just did, she's laughing because I did the thinking, but I had not been able to deal with what the issue was. And through her just providing space, I suddenly had a breakthrough. So I'm very grateful. So what was it like for you guys?
It was good. I will say, I mean, Tiago and I know each other already, so we have a good relationship, but I learned a lot. I was the listener, and I learned a lot about, Tiago saying that like clients create by their nature are coming in to share problems. So they're more likely to create, lawyers are already going to be creating space for them to share and for the lawyers to be doing the deep listening. But in personal relationships, you have to be more intentional.
And how did you do all the listening, Lindsay? You didn't swap roles?
Yes.
No, okay. And Tiago, what did you feel about Lindsay's listening? How much of the 8 steps was she able to do?
As Lindsay was saying, we know each other for a few years. We recorded a few podcasts together, and for me it's very easy to talk to Lindsay and to say and to talk a lot. So it was easy. I feel very comfortable talking to Lindsay, so it was already easy
Yeah. And did you feel with her silence and space and her not driving the conversation, did you have any insights that you didn't have
So
before?
Lindsay was trying hard to let it go and not put the questions,
Oh,
and she did it. She did it well. Yeah, I think, and this happens when we speak to people that we are comfortable, and that's we got to that theme as well. And as Lindsay was saying, lawyers already have the comfort space for to have the clients in. They know we have a room, no one is here to listen to the conversation. They are in confidentiality. So this is a very old profession, and it's very focused on letting people know that they can say anything, and we are here to listen to them and then to think about what they say. Um, so yeah, Lindsay does this very well, and she's a very good listener. So it was easy to make to get to reflect on the topics and understand that the challenging parts, and also to let her know what for me was the most challenging, I think, relationship, because it's very long. It's with the kids. It's with my kids. because it's very long. It transforms a lot along the time as they grow, as they have new ideas, and as we sometimes are very separate in the points of view and in the way we see reality, and then we come together very often, and then we go apart again, and so on. So it's and there in those relationships, this idea and these skills of deep listening are very important, because making them comfortable, letting us be, allowing us to be comfortable in hearing them and not driving them through to what we want them to say or think, is very, very important.
I mean, I think those are all really good points. Any reflections from you, Lindsay, not on the content of what you shared, but more on what the listening was like and how you felt about not being directive, and whether you were tempted to, I don't know if Tiago shared about a difficult relationship, whether you were tempted to come up with solutions, whether you felt comfortable not coming up with solutions. How did that go?
Yes, that part was challenging. I think the thing I struggle the most with is not asking questions directly. And I think, as you had said before, you know, as for you as a journalist, you come up with all of these ideas of like, I'd like to dig into this piece more. So that idea of just finding a way to sum up and then create that space for Tiago to direct the conversation was really interesting. And there was one point where I really wanted to ask a question, and I reframed it in a way that was more of a, you know, let's sum this up and move forward. But that thinking about it in that way is really different. And, you know, just allowing that space for people to share what they want to share, and then not, you know, not go forward with other things, but also, you know, sort of read the conversation in that way. You really are thinking a lot about the content of what the other person is saying.
Yeah, and this doesn't mean that, of course, you know, going to ask questions. It doesn't mean you forever go to the back seat, never have your voice, never get to ask questions. It's about some other way of being that you can introduce, even in the midst of all sorts of conversations. And I would imagine, Tiago, even in those lawyer conversations where you give somebody space, you might also get something a little different if you use this approach rather than, you know, your general open, you can say anything. And it's that safety. You know, we talked about step one, creating a place, you know, of the right space, the place of safety, which you obviously do because it's critical for a lawyer to be able to understand their clients and speak openly. But it's also, you know, about sometimes naming the noise in the room, really allowing them, and also emotions, also picking up on emotions, because there's so much research. If we don't reflect back emotions, people won't feel heard, because, you know, emotions are so important in driving so much of our behavior, even in a professional context. And what's really exciting is that I did a big piece of research. So we recruited 1,000 people in 100 countries for the BBC and the British Council. And I thought, I'm not doing something at this scale without getting and seeing if it works. So I reached out to some academics at the University of Reading, and we had a control group, and the paper's actually just been published a couple of weeks ago in the bedtime reading, the Journal of Applied Social Psychology, not bedtime reading. But it evidenced that when people were using deep listening, this approach, and it was training over 3 weeks in a total of 6 hours, so it was more than this little taster today. But when they were practicing deep listening, they used a lot more listening approaches. They also were much more connected and more willing to re-examine their own attitudes. And that's really, really important, because when we're, especially in a confrontational setting, or when we disagree with a colleague or client or anybody else we're working with, if we really listen to them first, they will reduce their defenses. They will become more open to listen to us. And it feels counterintuitive, because we want to tell them all the arguments why they're right. Why we're right. We feel if only we could tell them what the truth was, they would come around to us, but they won't. And it's only when they feel we really get them that they're then open. And there's been other research conducted also by a guy called Guy Yitzchakov, which has shown that when people are properly heard, they reduce their attitude extremity on all sorts of really difficult political issues. How does that sound? Could you imagine using it in a professional context?
Yes,
Yeah.
sure.
Perhaps give me some examples just to inspire other people. In what kind of context could you imagine?
I wouldn't say so much with clients, but a lot with colleagues, because we the other another part of what we do is lots of times just reach agreements and try to put deals together with the other part that is not our client, but is the lawyer from the other part. And
Mm,
it's a lot of times it's very important to make other people feel that they are being heard, and that
mm,
we are thinking about the solution together with them, and then say, okay, as you were saying, we or picking up on what you were on
mm,
your idea, we can make this now, and then
mm. Yeah, and people
uh,
feel, of course, if they've been included, if you've listened to them, if you're including their perspective, we're naturally more
I was
likely to
I was
buy in.
writing I was writing an email for an hour and a half this morning that I received from a client, hungry, and they're like, "What? I'm going to tell this," and then say, "No, no, you're not. You're picking up the reply that you got and say, thank you. We listen to you. Picking up your words here. We propose the solution." And the guy
Yeah.
just he sent me an email now saying, "Oh, this is much better. They will come to our position for sure. Yeah, they will."
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well done, you, Tiago. And Lindsay, have you got some thoughts that might be helpful for other people?
I do. Yes, I was thinking about this in the context of dealing with clients and that idea of, especially sort of reading between the lines. And then, as you said, sort of picking up on the energy in the room and using that, even if a client feels that they're in a safe space and they can share whatever they want confidentially, there may be things that when you sum up what they've been telling you, that just allows them to think through their issues a little bit further. Or, if you feel like a client is maybe a little uncomfortable and you come around to bringing that up, they might feel that they're the thing, Tiago mentioned before, this idea that like sometimes clients don't tell you everything about a situation and some of those things are important. And they may not even realize that that thing's important, but if you address this idea that there's a little something else that you feel like they want to tell you, they may share the things that really help get to the crux of their legal issues.
Yeah, that is so important, and it can be really empowering. And it's that vulnerability, it's that noise in the room. It's really being courageous. I think it does take courage because sometimes we're going outside a sort of normally expected conversation. We're breaking out of script. And
Mhm.
that feels a little risky and uncomfortable, and we're not sure how the person react. But often it's the breaking out of script, the vulnerability that changes everything. And your
Mhm.
relationship with your client can be taken to a whole different level. And so often we stick at these very superficial conversations, and small talk is really important often. And it helps us feel comfortable and all of that. And we don't want to just have deep, meaningful conversations all the time. But when we feel comfortable enough to, and even say, if you meet a client a number of times and say, usually I see you bouncing in the room and I'm getting a sense that today it's not, you're not quite. I don't know if there's anything that's relevant you feel you want to share, and just naming it and bringing it into the room and seeing what's possible can enable you then suddenly to go to a different level. Of course, with all those ethical and confidential issues that we talked about. I just want to go back to I'll just go back to the 8 steps. And I'm just wondering I'll just share, if there's any other thoughts or questions that you feel in terms of bringing this into your work that are relevant, or your home life, because hey, we need to be happy at home. And especially with our kids, I don't know, I certainly feel a lot of the time that I felt that my role was to instruct and to solve. And the other thing I think, especially with kids, is that, and indeed not just with kids, with people in our team, when they tell us that difficult stuff, we want to stay away from it because we feel like by giving it airtime. I remember even with colleagues of mine when they wanted to complain at the BBC that they weren't being paid enough or their career progression, and I was their boss, I felt I couldn't do anything. So I stopped them in their tracks. I said, well, yes, I'm sure it's very frustrating for everybody. Shut up, move on. I didn't say that, but that's what I was communicating. And of course, they left feeling angry and unheard. And if only I had been brave enough to actually say, I hear you're feeling kind of frustrated, and actually hear their frustrations without feeling I needed to solve them. I would have been such a better leader had I done that. I don't know whether you guys feel brave enough to do that, listening to, and with kids as well. My daughter would come home from school and say, oh, the teachers really picked on me. And I'd say, no, I'm sure they haven't. I'm sure that's only the way and she'd say, no, it's not true. Or she'd just say, yeah, and, no communication. Whereas you don't have to say, yes, the teacher picked on you, but you can say, I'm hearing you say you felt pretty rubbish today. Is that right? It felt like, for you, it felt like the teacher was picking on you. You don't say the teacher was picking on you. You're talking about hearing what they feel. Yeah. I don't know if any of that rings true to you.
It does, yeah. It
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
It's hard to, as I felt when doing this with Jay, it's hard to just to sit back and not derive the perspective of the people of the other person that is letting us understand what's happening in their minds.
Yeah. It is very hard. And for me, I've still got this deep listening, nice picture to remind me to do it on my desk. Yeah. It is really hard, especially, with most intimate relationships and when we know we feel we're right. But for me, when I became a coach and trained to be a coach, there's so specific learnings around that behavior. As soon as I put it going into coach mode, it became very easy. It doesn't mean I always find it easy at all. I still do that. And that's why, in a way, mediator who taught me a lot about listening say, you can learn this in 10 minutes. It takes a lifetime to learn to practice it. So I wish.
I think it does sound a lot like the practicing of it is the important part.
Yeah.
Especially with key relationships, not just personally, but professionally as well.
Yeah, it really can. But what's so exciting is that Carl Rogers wrote, we're all in the process of becoming. You're not fixed to be the same person you were last year, last month, or even last night. You have the possibility to enter in your relationships with your key colleagues and clients and family in a really different way and see what happens. All sorts of new things can become possible. So thank you so very much. I'm very, very grateful for you participating and for everybody who is watching this webinar. And I wish you very good luck in your deep listening journey. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you so much, Emily. I have really learned a lot, and I hope that Jay and Tiago have as well. And I know even for those who weren't able to be here live, who will get the benefit of this recording, that they'll really learn a lot too. And I hope that they'll, really listen to people in a better and different way, but also take a moment to purchase your book. For those that we'll be giving a copy to, reading the book, and I'm sure we'll learn a lot more.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I would also say that by deeply listening, we can also play our small part in tackling, the twin crises in the world, as I see it, of loneliness and polarization. And that feels really empowering and exciting because so many people don't feel heard. Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I was thinking of polarization too when you were speaking earlier, and especially this idea that, we should just cut each other off when we don't agree. So I think this is a really different way to not necessarily agree with what someone's saying, but hear what's really behind what they're saying, and also, listen to each other and hopefully move to a new way forward together.
Yeah, thank you so much. And a pleasure to meet you, Tiago and Jay and Lindsay.